Hi everyone, I'm Deirdre Breakenridge, CEO of Pure Performance Communications. Welcome to the Nasdaq PR Influencer Series. We're live at MarketSite in Times Square in New York City, and I'm here with Dorie Clark, who is a branding strategist. She's a speaker, she is a professor, and the author of the book Standout. Dorie, hi, thank you so much for joining us.
Great to be here, Deirdre, thanks.
You're welcome. Well, there is a lot to talk about, but I want to start with your book, Standout. So I was drawn to your book because it was all about the breakthrough idea and then being able to build a following around that. And a lot of brands and professionals are struggling in the market to really stand out. So maybe you could share some strategies from the book on how they could do a better job.
Well, these days the concept of virality gets talked about so much. Everybody's chasing the viral video, the viral tweet. But ultimately, if we take a step back, what virality means is that fundamentally you are creating something that's interesting enough that consumers want to share it with other people. And so when I'm advising brands, I like to advise them to think about how to build a community around their products. BMW, Harley Davidson are great examples of this, where they bring people together around the product and therefore create what the author Seth Godin likes to refer to as a tribe. I think that's really the future of where companies need to go and how they need to start thinking.
Well, the tribe is so important, and I know that in the book, of course, it is about brand awareness. It's finding your niche and what you do best and getting the word out. So when it comes down to the tribe or building the relationship, how do you think that brands can build a better relationship with their tribe?
Well, I think that one of the areas that has been really underappreciated is customer service. Now, of course, we hear stories about how Twitter is these days being used more and more as a way for companies to interact and liaise directly with customers. Customer service is not sexy, has never been sexy.
No.
But the truth is, it's the backbone of how people think about and interact with brands. And if companies invest more in that area, they're going to have exponential dividends.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about that. You're right, you see a lot of customer service through Twitter. When customers get upset, sometimes they take right to Twitter, or sometimes it's maybe after hours of spending time on the phone with customer service. Social media in general has changed the way that we build relationships. Maybe you can just comment on that. Is it good for the brand? Is it bad for the brand? What's right, what's wrong?
Well, it's bad for a brand in terms of how social media has changed things if they are just chasing the latest shiny object, which so many companies do. They think that they need to be diving in on Snapchat or this platform or that platform without an overarching strategy. What brands need to be thinking about, and this is something that I emphasize in my book Standout, is thinking about the overall message of communicating who they are and how they are in the world. That's why customer service is so crucial, and that's why it's important for brands to have a narrative with every interaction, and customers are having them more directly and more frequently than ever before. The company needs to convey not just what they do, but who they are in the world.
Yeah, at all times, that's so important. So this community that develops, because this is not just a one-shot tribe, right? You get all of these brand ambassadors and these fans, and whether your supportive community is it's on Twitter or perhaps it's on Facebook, wherever it is, how do you maintain that level of trust?
Well, I think when it comes to maintaining a level of trust with your community, one of the best things you can do is to keep up the consistency and frequency of your communications. For so many companies, there's a tendency that if there's a big launch, they go crazy, and if there's a big crisis, they go crazy, and they're interacting a lot. The real value is in the relationship over time. I used to be a presidential campaign spokesperson, and hearkening back to a political example, if we look at the 2000 elections, George W. Bush and Al Gore were pilloried by the media anytime they made a mistake because they limited access to the media so much. All they could do was gotcha. Meanwhile, during that campaign, John McCain gave almost unlimited access to the press, and as a result was rewarded for it because when he made a mistake, they had the context to understand where he was coming from. If more companies take that approach, I think we'll all be better off.
No, it is. It's a really good approach. And that openness, that transparency, and all of those touch points have to be well branded, of course. You mentioned the word crisis. So we have seen, well, we always see in the news, but especially of late, brands are standing out in the wrong way. And that's really tough because we have an extremely dynamic public. And you notice that when something happens, it's going to be captured by that smartphone. So, Dorie, what can brands do? Many who either inflict self-crisis or the ones who just get caught up in something. How do you protect yourself? How do you maintain your brand?
One of the best ways to think about this, Deirdre, and I actually teach a course on this at Duke University, is about there's fundamentally 3 different responses that a company or an individual can have when there's a crisis. That is, I didn't do it, I did it and it was justified, or I did it and I'm sorry. And the number one rule, which companies violate again and again, is that if you're going to have to end up at that last point, if you're going to have to end up at the apology, you should go there as fast as you humanly can. If you don't, the media is going to drag it out, drag you through the mud, and you're going to be sullied. It is painful and hard to immediately go to the apology, but if you do, it'll be better for all parties.
Right, the media will drag it out, and so will the people who are sharing the media, and even their own social media. So we've touched on a lot here, and this would not be a complete discussion if we didn't really dive into a measurement portion. So I just want to mention a statistic from the Nasdaq CCO measurement survey. So 100 chief communications officers were surveyed, and the response was that among the top 3 KPIs measured was brand awareness. Now, that is not a shock. I'm sure that doesn't surprise you. But my question to you is, you're in the trenches, you're working with companies. Are they really putting the time, the investment into measuring their brand?
Well, I think that from the beginning, the internet has been difficult for people to know how to measure. In the earliest days, people looked at banner ads and said, oh, we can't track that. That's so complicated. And now, of course, with click-throughs and online advertising, we actually can get more data than from other means, like billboards or television, et cetera. But even with that, the ROI remains a vexing question. I think, though, that what companies really need to do is to begin to reframe the question. Brand awareness is fine, it's nice, it's necessary. But what actually matters a lot more is not just if people have heard of you, it's about the level and depth of the relationship you have with your customers. And I think that forming direct channels so that ideally companies are building databases of their customers where they can communicate with them directly is going to be the future. We see with social media, every time Twitter or Facebook rejiggers their algorithms, all it means is that companies have to pay more and more to reach their own followers. That's not sustainable. They need to create the direct connection themselves.
No, that's a really great point. I agree. I mean, you have to move. Brand awareness is very important, but it's actually moving toward the click and the conversion and seeing that impact happen. So if you could give us the gift of feedback, let's take some of your feedback, put it in a package and tie it in a bow and give it to PR professionals. What would you say just in general about brand and reputation and expanding your digital footprint?
When it comes to expanding your digital footprint, for a lot of companies, they are under the belief that they need to be everywhere, they need to do everything. Certainly if you are an enormous consumer packaged goods company, if you're Coca-Cola, yes, sure, you need to be doing that. But for the vast majority of other companies, even large companies, it matters far more to choose strategically and go deep in the channels, social and otherwise, that can really reach your customers. You do not have to be on Pinterest. Now, you might want to be, depending what you do. If you're Benjamin Moore Paints, yes, you do. But for a lot of companies, if you sell insurance, that's not the vehicle. You need to be smarter about where you're allocating your resources, and you can get a far greater ROI.
No, that is a great point. Excellent advice. So, Dorie, what's next for you? What's going on in your world? Do you have another book coming out by any chance?
Thank you. I actually do. In October, I have a book coming out from Harvard Business Review Press called Entrepreneurial You.
Wow.
Yes, thank you. It's a book about how to monetize your expertise and create multiple revenue streams, and certainly that applies to professionals, even those working in companies, to be able to create those sort of side streams in Plan B. But it also, frankly, applies to corporations. I think that in many cases, we think we're diversified just because we have maybe a number of different clients. But if you're providing the same service to all of those clients, that is a lack of diversification that breeds risk. What we need to start thinking about in the modern era for individuals as well as companies is how we can take the same concept, the same ideas, but slice it and spin it in different ways so that we can create very distinct revenue streams that can sustain us in case of emergencies or crises.
Well, sounds like a great book. It's going to be on my wish list. So where can people find out more about you, your work, and your books?
Thank you. People can go to dorieclark.com. I have more than 400 free articles as well as a free standout self-assessment toolkit that can help people develop their own breakthrough ideas and build a following around them, all free at dorieclark.com.
Excellent. Dorie, thank you so much for discussing brand, reputation, expanding your footprint. We really appreciate it.
Deirdre, thank you.
Thank you. And I want to thank all of you for tuning in for the Nasdaq PR Influencer Series. Stay tuned for more from Nasdaq.